and go from here.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 5:05 on 10/20/2021. First order of business is approval of the agenda for possible action. Subcommittee will review the agenda and may take action to approve the agenda. The subcommittee may remove items from the agenda, combine items for consideration, or take items out of order.
So moved.
We have a second.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Move on to number 3, approval of minutes from the June 9th, 2021 meeting. This also is for possible action. I'll just say that the meetings were brief and they seem to be accurate from what I saw. Do we have,
Move to approve.
we have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And passes unanimously. We'll now move on to the meat of the meeting, the Area 10 project proposal. For possible action, the subcommittee will discuss and complete the limiting factor ranking sheet and discuss and work towards completion of the needs assessment worksheet. The subcommittee will identify up to 3 projects to submit to the Oversight Committee for consideration. So, did everybody have a chance to look at those? First, the limiting factor sheet, and was everybody able to either fill it out or at least think it through?
Yeah.
Okay. Sean sent me his. And so the way I was thinking we would do it, I can share my screen really quick.
Scott, you got mine as well, didn't you?
I did, but you had said that you were potentially thinking of changing some of them, and so I hadn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't
We-
hold on to those.
Okay.
Did you get mine, Scott?
I may have. I didn't see it, but I can.
I sent a follow-up text or email and you said, yeah, you got it, but I didn't
Okay.
know. It was so weird the way it went out that I didn't know.
Okay. But if everybody has access to it, I just threw together an Excel spreadsheet that is set up exactly the same as those forms. But it'll just be able to show everybody's at once, and then it'll give us an average and just kind of simplify the melding of everybody's rankings here. Let's see here. Tom, can you give me the ability to share my screen?
I think, yeah, let me see here.
It's up now.
Oh, there you go. Now it's up.
Okay, and that's showing the Excel spreadsheet? Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
So like I said, I just threw this together in the last couple minutes, and so we'll see how well I did or didn't do on this. But the way I was thinking, we'd just go through, fill it out completely, and then we can go ahead and talk our way through it. So I guess, Matt, do you have yours in front of you?
Yeah, I do. One moment, I got to get out of this full screen.
Okay.
Yep, whenever you're ready, Scott.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just gonna go. I'm not gonna list off the actual
just
fact or just a number. I'm gonna go 4, 2, 4, 3, 5, 3, 5, 1, 5. Skipping human impacts, direct, going to collisions. 1, 2, 1. 3, 1, 2. 0, 5. Going to population 1, 2, 1.
Sean, did you have any changes you wanted to make, or you want me to just
No.
fill in what you sent?
No, yeah, no changes, and I
Okay.
don't have it, or I would read it for you.
Well, were you able to look at that?
Yes, I was. I saved it to my computer, but I can't find it, so I had to start all over.
Okay. You want me to go ahead and fill Bert's out first?
No, I've got it here. I filled
Okay.
another one out by hand.
Okay, perfect.
3, 2, 2, 2, 2, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 2,
Shoot.
2.
2 on heavy industry. So,
Yes.
okay.
2 on heavy industry. And then human mortality or human caused mortality 2, 5, 1, 0.
Okay. Bert, you got yours there, Andy?
I do not. I sent it to you and it disappeared
Okay.
into the ozone, but we can go through it pretty quickly.
I can grab it really quick.
Okay, if you can find it.
Scott, I don't know if that makes a difference, but you should put a 0 under power lines for me. My apologies.
Okay.
If you can't find it, Scott, we can go through it pretty fast.
Okay, yeah, I don't have it.
Okay, so 5, 2, 2. I'm not sure what that means, but 2, 5, 3, 3, 3. Adequate mitigation quarter 2. Human impacts direct. I'm going to say 2. 0, 0, 2, 1, 0, 1, 2. Wait a minute, which one did I just say 2 to?
The renewable energy.
Let's go back to 1. Heavy industry 2. Other 0. Human caused mortality 1. Predation 3. Disease 1. Another 0.
Okay. So there's an obvious one we all agree on. Heavy industry looks like an obvious one.
Fire.
Fire, PJ invasion, and weather and climate. So looking at these right off the top, climate and weather, not much we can do about it through this process. Wild horses, as far as project design, there's probably not a whole lot we can do about it, outside of spring protections and some of the other potential projects.
Yeah.
So I guess focusing on ones that we can potentially, and again, heavy industry, I think our voice can be heard, but it's not an everyday conversation that's being had. And I think there's times in the future where this process and this team will need to come to the table and voice our opinions. But
Yeah, that's work.
I think for this year's project proposals, really all 3 of those are probably not what we should be focusing on.
Good.
And so
Voted and home.
I guess moving to the next heaviest weighted, you can
Charlie, then like
look at our
roll the papers.
corridor, PJ invasion, and really wildfire.
All right.
And
Bye.
so I think we can go through the limiting factors in management actions form, but just initial thoughts, or those are potentially some that we can focus on, at least in the short term. So and again, same form that was sent out. Matt, do you have yours in front of you there?
Yeah, just one moment. Did you want to go through that and score all that, Scott, or did you just to help kind of guide the conversation, or did you want to just kind of go ahead and throw some projects out there? What was your thought?
I think we go ahead and get everybody's scoring out on the table, and then we can talk through all of it. We can, look at what we're all agreeing on and what there's some disagreement on, and then, talk our way through it is the way I envision it.
Okay. So just kind of going from top to bottom, like we did the limiting factors. 2, 4, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 4, 3, 4, 3, 3, 1, 4, 4, 4, 4, 1, 1, 3, 1, 5, 2, 3, 2, 2, 1, 5, 3, 0, 3. And then moving on to the second page. 3, 3, 5, 4, 4, 2, 2, 0. 0, 1, 0, 3, 3, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 0, 1, 0, 3. I didn't add anything for human impacts, direct or indirect prescription, Scott.
Did I miss one there?
And then the last, hold on, let me take a look at your human impacts. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so big game coloring should have started with a 3, 3, 0, 1, 0, 3.
Okay. Do you have any on those?
I didn't add anything there.
Okay.
And I will just say, even for a habitat biologist, some of this didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So.
Okay. Sorry for the monotony of the front end of this. Walt, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 2, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 0, 4, 1, 1, 3, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0,
Hang on.
0, 0.
Oh, hang on really quick.
Okay,
No, I got mixed up. I put a 1 on DOT action. And then if we can start from there.
okay. DOT action was the 0, 0, 0, 0, 5, 2, 1, 0, 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 0, 3, 0, 1.
And then on the other at the bottom,
The human
Oh.
impacts, direct or indirect, and other I left blank.
I guess those are the ones that Sean had written in. Okay. All right, Bert, you ready?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
3, 4, 2. I have no clue what chemical fallow means. Can somebody explain that?
Matt can.
Yeah, Bert, so essentially when we were talking about treating like cheatgrass or Medusa head or any winter annual, you would treat with a pre-emergent fallow for one season that ground before you came back and seeded something else. Just because if you were to seed in that same year, you could potentially have impacts on the seed that you put in the ground that year because there's a residual control.
Okay, so I'd give that a 3. I'd give the next one 5. Again, biological control. What are you talking about there?
Yeah, so sometimes you can use like weevils or something like that to control noxious weeds.
Okay, I'd give that a 2. All right, 5, 5, 3, 2, 5, 2, and a prescribed fire 0. I don't want to see anything on fire out there anymore. 5, 4, 5, 2, 1, 0. 3, 2, 4. Spot treatment with herbicide. What are you talking about?
I think again, spot treatment to me, rather than like a chemical fallow, would mean like ground-based herbicide application versus like a fixed wing or helicopter aerial application. To me, that's what that means.
Okay, I'll give that a 2. Next one, 5, 3, 4, 2. And I'm mixed about grazing management because it just says grazing management. So is that wildlife, or is that wild horses, or is that livestock? So in that, I'm going to give it a 3 because I don't know which one it's going to be. Easement acquisitions a 3, water development a 4, spring protection 5. Okay, we're back. 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 4. And then trail camera grid, what's that?
Scott can answer that.
Yeah. It's been utilized to some degree in multiple states. It'll give you a really solid abundance estimate of not only your ungulate species, but your predator species. It's being tried in Washoe County right now, between two different universities. I can't think of them off the top of my head. And they're trying to get at relative abundance of all the predator species with respect to the available prey species. And it'll potentially, you know, give them areas to focus their efforts if they are interested in targeting, you know, one predator or another in a set area.
So at this point, Scott, we don't know whether it works well or not.
I think you can say that the estimates that come out of it are statistically rigorous. But the next step of generating projects off of that really hasn't taken place.
I'd give it a 3 then. Thank you.
Yeah.
1 on predator research. We studied them and studied them. 4 on the deer collar. 2, 4, 3, 4. And then I would jump on the other on the road closures. I'd look at that as a 3. And I would not eliminate doe harvest at all. I wouldn't. So 0 on doe harvest. Shortened seasons. With it, I'd give it a 1. Subunit management, I got no clue how you do that. 2.
So does anybody have any others or human impacts that they want to add to this list before we move on?
I would jump onto that, eliminate the doe harvest with a 5.
Okay. Let's go ahead and rate all of them. These were a couple that Sean had proposed. And so let's just go ahead and rate all of them, and then any subsequent others that we add to the list, and then we can, you know, have a conversation about all of it. So Walt, shortened seasons and subunit management, you want to score at those?
No, I would leave that alone, but the doe harvest, if it's going to be on there, I am strongly in support of eliminating that.
Okay. Matt, you want to go ahead and add scores to these 3?
Sure, 1, 1, 1, just like
Okay.
you.
Okay. So I guess let's just take it one bite at a time. We'll look at the wildfire and invasives first. A couple that are jumping out: the targeted application of herbicide, shrub plantings, grazing management, mechanical thinning within fuels management projects. Are both tied there. So I guess, you know, those are all potential jumping off points for projects. You know, shrub plantings are realistic and relatively easy if we're, you know, planning it out a year in advance. Targeted application of herbicide, again, that's kind of a solution waiting for a problem. And then mechanical thinning removal. We have NEPA cleared for multiple projects within Area 10. And so if that's what we decided to move forward on, we could look to secure more funding for those projects, and that would be realistic moving forward. Does anybody have a comment on wildfire and invasives there? Anything to add?
And I gave it a 5. And that would be qualified with, if we were looking at horses. If it's not, then it's a 3,
Okay,
or maybe even a 2. Because I don't, I look at grazing management in my mind out there has nothing to do with livestock. It has everything to do with horses. That's the way I think about it. But if we can't qualify it with that, then I'm a 2.
okay. Yeah, and just like anything, trying to write these forms broad enough to where they apply to the entire state, it's hard to make them that specific.
Understand?
Yeah. So moving on to Conifer Invasion. Ones that jump out: masticator, hand thinning. And then again, grazing management. And in my mind, the grazing management is protecting your investment within these projects, post whatever kind of mechanical treatment happens, it's protecting that investment. If and when you are seeding these projects, prior to a chaining, prior to mastication, giving those plants the opportunity to get established before you have, any sort of major grazing regime put back on it. And so, a lot of that just goes into the planning of the projects prior to. Anybody have anything they want to add to the Conifer Invasion portion of it? And again, building off what I just said, there's cleared acreage for hand thinning and for mastication in the South Rubies, and we have limited acres on spruce. So there's potential, if this is what we decided to focus, one or all the projects on, that would be a viable option.
Hey, Scott, I've got a question, and maybe this is a habitat related question. Is there benefits to leaving areas of conifers, cedars, pinions, and junipers for like a thermal layer for cover and things like that, or is it really not an issue as far as deer go?
It absolutely is important to have leave islands, and we try to utilize those. Often it's around arc sites, so we don't have enormous leave islands to where you're minimizing the effect of the project. Mm-hmm. But you definitely want to have those areas where deer can seek refuge, especially in major storms or wind events or anything like that. And so, yeah, we try to leave, some percentage. I think sometimes we're running off like 10%, Matt. Is that correct?
Yeah, 10 to 20%. And I think it also depends on the density of the trees. Sometimes we'll choose some really dense clusters of trees that really we're not gonna get any added benefit from knocking those trees down. We'll leave them for thermal cover, because we don't, we're trying to get the best bang for our buck in treating these areas. And if you have dense clusters, we'll just leave those for thermal cover and treat the stuff that has some relatively intact understory.
Got it. Thank you.
Moving on to lack of diversity. Spring protection jumps out. Everything else is pretty similar. Shrub plantings, grazing management, again, both jump up. And I have a hard time keeping all of this separated, shrub plantings and wildfire and shrub plantings here. I think shrub plantings and wildfire, you have a lot more potential for being successful. Here, I don't know exactly what the shrub plantings would be. I don't understand the design, I guess. Matt, do you have any feel? I mean,
No, I feel the same way, and that's what I meant by some of this, even as a habitat guy, is a little bit confusing and a little bit subjective in how you look at the potential question. And so shrub plantings here, honestly, I think you would be better suited in treating shrub senescence in intact communities versus planting new shrubs.
yeah.
I agree.
So I guess, if the shrub planting was part of a bigger process, it makes sense here. If not, I'm not sure exactly how that would be designed.
The only other place, Scott, I can see that would, at least right now, that I could see where that would make sense is back in the Conifer Invasion. Planting some shrubs and would make a difference there, especially if you're limited or you had some bunch of old, really decadent brush.
Yeah. Moving on to lack of connectivity. Corridor jumps out, and I guess that's kind of a overarching idea that really everything else within this is kind of under the umbrella of the migration corridor. But fence modifications jumps up a little bit. Really nothing else kind of jumps out. I rated land use planning as a 5 because I think it's one of the most important issues facing Area 10 potentially, but within the scope of this team and initiating projects, it's probably not, it's not rising to the top, I guess, in the short term. Moving on to predation. Deer collaring study, and again here I rated it a 4, and then I can talk myself out of that with respects to predation, and coming down here and having it be part of the data gaps portion. I think it makes more sense. I think a lot of the benefits that would be gleaned from a deer collaring predation project are still gleaned from these data gaps, and then you're not constrained by a set focus like you are up here. So I guess I'm talking myself out of that 4, and I would probably make it a 2 or something. And just know that I still think the collaring's worthwhile. I just don't think it should be under this portion of the form.
Put in that aspect, I agree. You take me down to a 2 also there.
Okay. And so in predation, coyote removal is rising to the top. So if we were looking at a project there, initial thoughts of that would probably be our focus. Moving on to disease, I think there's some,
Scott, when you do that though, let's go back and change deer collar and steady under, where are we? Oh, no, we're fine.
okay,
Never mind, I'm looking down below.
yeah.
There we go. All right, never mind.
So moving on to wildlife health. The disease testing, it's usually opportunistically undertaken by the department outside of the set CWD testing. Usually we're testing individuals that are showing outward signs or questionable signs. And so in overall management of the area 10 and producing projects, I'm not seeing anything that really rises to the top there. And I'm not quite sure why it just tag numbers ended up there. So data gaps, big game collaring rises to the top. And as we were just talking about, I think there's a lot of value in maintaining the collars in the East Humboldts that we just got out this past year and potentially supplementing those collars. The rubies, South rubies, we've had hundreds of collars in place over the last decade. And through agreements with BLM and Bald Mountain, we're going to be maintaining those collars, at least in the relative short term. So I think for the rubies portion, we're probably pretty well set. But I think
Yeah, how about yourself, White? Your hunt going good?
Yeah, there's quite a few elk over here, Walt. Quite a few bulls, quite a few elk.
ask him where he's hunting.
On that note, Scott, thinking about those East Humboldt deer, you could probably adjust my score to a 4.
Okay.
I think that's a pretty important thing. And then back to the adjusting tag numbers. Honestly, that score is just consistent with my late hunt changes, as I have a history with that particular hunt. You could, I was just being consistent there. So you could probably drop the adjust tag numbers to a 2 along with the late hunt field. I don't know if that was on the last one or not.
Okay.
Yeah, just being consistent.
And then I guess I was working off Sean's form. Was this road closure written in? I'm thinking that.
No,
No.
not for me, no.
Okay. I guess we didn't get scores for road closures.
I don't believe it was.
Okay. Yeah, I had just written mine next to yours just so I would have it on hand and easier. And so I don't have the form in front of me, but Matt, do you want to throw out a score for road closures?
Man, if we could, I like a 4 or 5, put a 4 in there.
Okay. And that's, again, that's probably not in the short-term cards, but that is something that we could pursue. I know the department's brought it up for a number of years of looking at seasonal closures on winter ranges and, you know, specific select roads. And there hasn't been a lot of movement, but through this process, I think, you know, there's potential that we could at least bring that conversation back up.
Scott,
And
can we go
Yeah.
back up to the add remove late hunt? I just saw the remove. I didn't see the add part.
Okay,
If we can add more late hunts, I'm good with that, but I don't, where did I might have 4 or a 1?
4.
Never mind.
Okay. So I guess before we kind of move on, is there anything that's surprising? Is there anything that we're missing? Is there any point of focus that wasn't brought up by the groups weighting or the average of everybody scoring? So I guess looking at that, we're working off the needs assessment sheet. The team is tasked with coming up with 3 projects for the coming year, knowing that this is going to be an annual process and there's going to be multiple chances to, you know, eat this elephant. This is just going to be the first bite. But I guess looking at this, does anybody want to start the conversation as far as potential projects or potential areas of focus for this coming year?
I don't know if I want to start the conversation so much as I want to ask some more questions. What is the parameters, or what are the parameters for projects?
They're pretty broad and open.
Do we have unlimited resources for this stuff?
We do not. We are going to be proposing projects and they're going to go to the statewide oversight committee and they are going to be prioritizing projects moving forward.
And I would just say if it's a habitat project, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, being NEPA analyzed and ready is probably the largest hurdle and something that we should consider before taking it to the oversight committee. So if it's not already cleared to do, I don't know that that's a project that we should be submitting right now. Is that correct, Scott?
That is correct. Yeah, we can put it in the hopper for coming years and we can get that ball rolling on other fronts. But for this year's projects, we're looking at NEPA cleared actions.
So I guess
I
that
have
begs
a
the question, which ones are NEPA cleared?
Well, I guess broad strokes, the Long and Ruby Valley watershed assessment is cleared. That's going to be hitting portions of the Medicines, Buttes, Long Valley, south end of Ruby Valley, portions of Buck Mountain. Then the Newark and Huntington Valley watershed assessment is cleared. That's going to be, really Bald Mountain down through Buck Mountain, all the way down into the north end area 13, and then coming back up the diamonds. And then the Overland project still cleared. That's centered around Overland Pass. There's, I believe, 2,200 acres south of the Overland Road, and then 4,000 acres cleared north of the road, somewhere in that ballpark. And then, Matt, around 600 acres still cleared on spruce. Is that correct?
Yeah, I talked to the BLM about that though, and I think Tyson's perspective is that he wanted to keep those acres in his pocket for Spruce Ridge and the potential treatment of that, as discussed in that one of those first field trips when they were developing that document. So I think that's where he's at with those 600 acres.
Okay. So, and there's a fair amount of funding already secured for spruce that hasn't been spent. And so that's probably not worth our focus until those acres are either cleared or treated. So south end of the Rubies, there's tens of thousands of acres cleared.
In your opinion, do you think the size of the Area 10 deer herd will play any sort of role in decision making, or do you think these projects may get pushed around to places that have more severe problems? Do you have any insight on that?
I think a lot of it's going to be dictated by the quality of our project proposals. I think, if we have viable projects, I think we can make a really strong case that they should be prioritized. And in some of those smaller herds, I think the inverse is true, that they can, as long as they have well-written projects, they should be able to prioritize because they're, not quite on the brink, but darn
Sure.
close. So,
Yeah.
and so, I guess to get the ball rolling, I had generated a list of potential projects that, we can focus on, or we can scrap all of them for this year, but just to get the conversation going, I had thought, some of those Buck Mountain projects, either side, whether it's Newark or the Ruby Long side, we do have quite a bit of funding already secured for those projects moving forward. But if it was, what we wanted to prioritize as a team, definitely wouldn't hurt to have more money down there, especially for longer term planning, moving forward into next treatment year and beyond. Another project that I was proposing was potential shrub planting within the quarter fire burn scar. As we saw on our field trip, the shrub response has not been ideal in major portions of that fire. And I think Matt and I have talked about it at length. I think there's room for some targeted shrub plantings where we can probably be pretty successful.
Yeah, I think that's one place I can definitely jump in there. I don't know where the Forest Service would be in terms of planting and some ground disturbance and needing NEPA, but it sounded like in conversations in the past that they would be fine with it. And so I'd be willing to try to make those contacts. I know that we had to vote on pushing these projects forward tonight, don't we, Scott?
Yes,
And so without having that authorization, would we want to list that as a project that we would like to push forward, or do we need to have something in writing from the Forest Service for that clearance? What's your sense?
I think it would be preferable if we did have that in hand, but I don't think it's a obstacle that we can't overcome. Knowing that this is securing funding for next project season. So I think we could probably overcome that in the coming 13 months or so.
Yeah. Yeah, leave it on the table. We'll see where the group lands after we get there.
Continuing on my list, we've already talked about it, the East Humboldt deer collars. I think there's a lot of value in at least redeploying those collars that we have, and then supplementing it with, another round of collars either next year or the following year. Those collars should be good for about 2.5 years, and they went on in January. And so we do have some latitude there. Working down that list, this is more general in nature, but looking at doing fence modification projects, looking at some of these older, less permeable fences that are on the landscape, some of these 5-6 strand 55-inch fences that deer have to struggle, burn precious calories moving up and down, finding spots to get through, and just knowing that there's dozens and dozens of those fences that they're going to be faced with on the landscape. I think there's real potential for projects, and knowing that I don't have the specifics today, it might not be a viable project option, but I think it's something worth keeping in mind, and hopefully in coming years it'll be something that we can focus on.
Scott, I have a question about the fencing. Now, does some of that removal actually have to go through landowners and private landowners for approval as well?
It does. Yeah, and a lot of the fences that I'm talking about would be on private lands.
Yeah.
And depending, it's really site specific, and it depends on age of fence and everything else. Some of these fences you're going to be looking at just total removal and replacing with more wildlife friendly fences. Some of them, it would be potentially just moving your wire spacing, and then there are some fences that you'd want to get rid of a wire or two.
Yeah.
And all of this would be with willing landowners. And we're doing it to a small degree and hoping to expand just moving forward, and kind of work up and down the migration corridor with willing participants, just trying to make that passage through the landscape as easy as possible. Because when you scale it up, there's very few things that are, costing as many calories for the Area 10 migration as a whole as just, deer migrating or moving through fences.
And so that would possibly be just through possibly a mile of fencing, and you're not talking as much north-south fencing, but east-west fencing. Does that make sense?
Correct. Yeah. And, we have millions of data points from callers, and we can be really specific in where we're targeting, and we can be really judicious in, which portions of the fence we have to modify, and we can be really effective in targeting those areas that are seeing the most use and, you know, potential
Well, it
problems.
seems like that would be a very it seems to me like that could be a very inexpensive yet effective project.
Yeah.
You know, you may be able to secure the labor just through volunteer work and stuff. So man, that sounds like that's a great idea.
And building off of that, you know, there's old dilapidated abandoned fences across the landscape. I can think of some down in 103 that, I mean, they would be great projects to just get them off the landscape, just pull out the wire. And, like you said, it's potentially inexpensive and pretty easy to do, and you can have a major positive effect, you know, more or less that day. So
Yeah. That sounds like a no-brainer to me.
I agree with you, Sean. That sounds like something we could do.
that's the end of my list. So now I'm all ears.
Just on the habitat side of things, and Scott, you're already well aware of this, but this being more reactive, honestly, but still working with the Forest Service on treatments and mapping in Medusa Head, both in the Harrison Pass area, Lamoille area, primarily on that west side. From my perspective, that's one of the biggest threats, quite frankly, because I think it only becomes this country south even becomes more susceptible to Medusa Head. And so we're going to keep working on that. We've secured funding through last year's funding cycle to do more treatments, and just waiting for clearance to use a newer herbicide that we think will work even better on the Harrison Pass stuff, and stuff we worked on that we've used on private that's worked really well. So we're hopeful that gets the clearance and we'll be able to treat that next year. But it's just one of those things that we keep on watching and could potentially be facing into the future. And I don't know if, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you foresee any funding shortfalls next year?
It's just so hard to know, to be honest with you. The Forest Service is actually working on the aerial clearance to treat with indaziflam right now, which is you wouldn't seem like it, but it's far cheaper than ground-based operation. You know, $10 an acre to fly aerially versus $150. And so if they can get that on, boy, it would actually become cheaper. So that'll keep on going. And then also, you know, we're doing that screen protection work in the ghost shoots, and it's not the lion's share of the area 10 mule deer herd, but you know, every little bit counts.
And to that point, you know, it's probably not in this year's funding cycle. But if we wanted to prioritize some spring protection moving forward, there's potential to work with private landowners down around Buck. That there may be, you know, some potential projects down there that we would be protecting springs near some of these treatment areas and potentially, you know, minimizing wild horse use in portions of the deer winter range.
Scott, could you go, like, maybe go into a little bit of detail on what you guys really the big benefits of the East Humboldt's collaring? I guess you probably get all kinds of different information, migration habits and patterns, predation, things like that. Are there other things that you specifically use that information for?
Yeah, we're going to be tracking it, and overlaying it on top of treatment areas through the Spruce Mountain Restoration Project from 2013.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And hopefully we'll have a large enough sample size to where we can make some inference with which projects they're focusing on during which conditions, and
Mhm.
what seeding and treatment combinations are seeing the heaviest use, and can it be attributed to the treatment, or is it just the site? And we're going to be focusing on some of the smaller secondary winter ranges that haven't got a lot of focus in the past. We've known about them, and we've known that movement was happening, but really trying to quantify that use in those secondary winter ranges, and potentially shift our focus if we see that we can actually have a positive benefit in some of those smaller mountain ranges.
Mhm.
Just
Which-
long-term planning, that data set's going to be important when working with DOT if they're looking at expanding the underpasses, overpasses, any sort of alterations to those highways over there. We'll be able to really focus or be effective in where we focus those corridors or overpasses, underpasses, and fencing moving forward. And yeah, a lot of it's just putting on paper what the department's been building over decades and decades, of the knowledge of those movements to those winter ranges, to those secondary winter ranges. And there's a lot of strength in having those little dots on the map in land use planning that we don't have with management agencies, when we just say, well, we know that they go there.
Yeah.
So
and maybe this is just a little off subject or whatever, but have you guys ever noticed that area 10 deer probably would be East Humboldt deer, possibly migrate as far as like the Dolly Varns? Do those deer go there? Or I mean, has anybody thought about possible thinning and things like that over in that small range?
To answer
I know there's
the
a lot of
question, yes.
attention on the South Rubies, but
yeah, it's so far the planning efforts have been focused on those heavier use areas. And the plan, moving forward is once we're done with those projects, we can build off of them and we can look at those secondary ranges. And there has been limited documentation of deer moving from Spruce over to the Dolly Gardens, during winter, trailing across there. If Caleb's still on, he's documented it in the past. And, really all of those smaller ranges all see some use in the winter time, whether it's the Delcer Buttes, West Buttes, Valley Mountain, Dolly Gardens,
Sure.
Area 10 deer move into the Cherry Creeks. That's been well documented for 60 years. So yeah,
for now, these projects would probably benefit the bigger picture and the higher use areas. I understand.
Yeah. And yeah, there are plans to, build off of them moving forward,
Sure.
but
Okay.
this is the lower hanging fruit to this point.
Okay. Well, I think like you brought before, the East Humboldt collaring is probably very important. Probably a good place to start for some history and tracking and traceability.
And like I said, that might not be within this year's funding cycle. It might make sense to do that next year, but I just wanted
Sure.
to get that on everyone's radar. Because we do have a few collars in hand and we're going to be redeploying those this winter. And so hopefully we're back close to that 30 collared deer mark again this year. And so I think there's some really interesting movements and some pretty exciting stuff coming out of that preliminarily. So.
So Scott, what are you asking us to do tonight? You want us to help prioritize? What do you?
As
I
a team, we're going to have to come up with 3 projects and we're going to have to agree on said projects. And then I'm going to do my best to write those project proposals up tonight and ship them to Reno because they're due tomorrow morning.
So that brings up a sticking point of mine, is that I don't think those of us who are not technically knowledgeable about all this are in a position to prioritize any of them. So what I would recommend out of this group right now, unless there's some objection, is we take Mr. Roberts, Mr. Glenn, and Caleb and Tom and let them pick projects, unless there's something in there that just sticks in your craw, what Scott's just said. And we go forth, and then we have meetings coming up that we can rediscuss and redefine, but we need to get them out. And that's, I think we're a little crunched for time because of all sorts of factors. So my knowledge base isn't extreme enough or good enough to say, Scott, you're wrong here, Matt, you're wrong there, I don't agree with it, I don't think you're right. From what I've heard, I'm good with what you guys have in your mind right now. You guys are far more qualified to come up with those priorities, because I don't think anybody disagrees. I didn't see any real disagreement in that board anywhere. So it's just a thought to move forward so you can go to get work and go to sleep tonight.
I guess before we do that, is there anything else that anybody wants to throw out as a potential? Just looking at the list again, wildfire and invasives, I think that's more, acting within the year typically. And we didn't have any major fires in Area 10 that we need to respond to. So I don't know if.
Whatever you can do to mitigate the Harrison Pass thing in this next year is a great thing. And the Medusa head, all that stuff makes perfect sense to me. And I saw Sean shaking his head, so I think he's in the same boat.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So I don't see anything else out there other than what you brought up already anyway, and what we went through when we we're down there. From where we sit as a group, the major influence that we can't have is on the wild horse problem. And that's, in my estimation, as everybody's heard me say time and again, that's the big issue. But the stuff you guys are working on are issues that help for now. And then we reorganize in a different way to go after the feds on horses. And we fix a whole lot of our problems on those winter ranges.
I would like to see something on predator control, but I don't know if that rated that high in our rating or not. But as low as our fawn recruitment is in the spring, I just got to think that there's a major coyote problem. And we could piggyback off of the project that's going on right now for the antelope, because these mountains, as soon as they fly, the coyotes come off the mountains back into the flats and the meadows. And I would like to see something done on the coyotes on the rubies, but I don't know if that's something we can swing or not, but I would like to see it.
We can propose any projects we want. So if the team agrees that that's one of our areas of focus, we can absolutely can. I guess the question would be initially, where would we be focusing and what time of year would we be focusing? You know, are you trying to get last year's fawns through the winter, or are you trying to get this year's fawns through May and early June?
And I think, Walt, what Scott's trying to get at here is that if the project potentially have more traction, if you are more specific in what you wanted to do, you know, you actually had a real plan outlined, if that makes sense.
I understand that. What is the fawn recruitment for this year? What was, when you flew this spring, what was the fawn recruitment per 100 does?
I would have to look. It was slightly above average, but just because we had nothing of a winter. Give me just a second, I'll tell you exactly what it was.
In what I'm seeing here, I'm seeing more of the young fawns. It seems like the ones that make it to midsummer are more likely to make it than the ones that we're losing more before midsummer than we are later in the year, from what I'm seeing.
And I think that depends
fawn
on the year. You know, winter of 18-19, we lost a vast majority of the fawns. I think on, you know, some of these years, you're absolutely correct that you're losing them in that first few weeks alive.
Isn't that the more difficult time to target coyotes though?
Being that
specifically target coyotes in the spring would be much more difficult than targeting in January. So
yeah, and I mean, just like anything, it depends on the site specifics and everything else and the focus. But yeah, you know, whether you're actually going after specific denning pairs or if you're just, you know, blanket coyote control across the landscape, I think they varying difficulty and varying success.
Yeah.
So
I think there's so many differing opinions about coyotes at this point. I think maybe we're so short on time, Walt, that to get this project in, that maybe we could bring it up as a group and sit and digest what the feds have done and what studies have been done so far, and then press forward if we think that's an issue at that time. But between now and tomorrow morning, I don't see us getting anything definitive out unless Scott's already and Matt's already got some kind of basis in the program already.
I
like
agree with that.
I would really like to see if coyotes are having a major impact on this deer herd. I'd like to see it. I would. But I don't think we have time between now and tomorrow to put that program definitively into place in front of anybody. But we have a year to take another shot at it. So
yeah, and I think that's a good point, Bert. I don't mean to interrupt, Walt, but I think that if you think about it and we want to propose it next year, that's also fine.
Yeah. Like I said, if we're going to vote, I agree with what Bert's saying as far as immediately we just need to get something out there, and there's still going to be a benefit to anything that we propose. So go to work, Scott.
I didn't hear the last half of what Sean said.
I just reiterated kind of what Bert said as far as regardless of what what you decide to submit, where I'm on board with what you decide to submit, like Bert says, one way or the other, it's going to be a benefit.
So the list I have, just to reiterate, Buck Mountain projects, the quarter fire shrub planting, the East Humboldt scholars, fence modification, Medusa Head, Go Shoot fencing, and Bald Mountain fencing. And we could even throw those Medicine Spring fences on there too, as potential projects. I guess one that we could, it would be less specific on the proposal, but it would give us time to go out and talk to landowners and, you know, use our collective contacts to figure out potential spots to modify fences. But if we just said, you know, hey, we're submitting a proposal for $50,000 of funding to modify fences in units 101, 102, and 103. Knowing that this is the first year and knowing that we're all under a self-imposed time crunch, I think if we wanted to, I think we could get away with that lack of specificity, just knowing that once we have the funding, there's plenty of opportunities out there, whether on private or on public ground. So I guess I think that's a viable project because I think it's something that we can see tangible success with. And I think, you know, like Sean said, there's potential for volunteer projects. There's potential for, you know, bringing more people into this process. And I think there's potential for, you know, building some momentum with that too, moving forward.
Yes, I like that one a lot. I think
I agree.
there's some education that goes into that too. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't realize those fences are causing problems.
Yeah.
They never think about them. So I think that's a good one.
I would like to see the one on the weeds taken care of. It's a lot easier to take care of the weeds now than it will be in 3 or 4 years.
Matt, you being a lot more familiar with that, how would you foresee that project proposal?
I honestly think right now we're in a pretty decent spot, Walt, as far as having it mapped and treating it like we are, I think, just waiting for the Forest Service, to be honest with you, to get that clearance to do that additional work. And so the hope is that that is in place. Doesn't mean that next year I won't be coming here beating that drum though, you know, because if there is that clearance is in place and we can buffer the area out, it could get expensive. And I honestly, there could be really great benefits in doing that. So I really like the idea. I think right now we're doing pretty good. But in that area, it would be easy enough, Scott, I think, to write up a shrub planting proposal for the quarter-fire and that stuff in Corral Creek and on that bench just north of Harrison Pass really could use some work.
Yeah.
And that's easy enough to look at, just knowing that the Forest Service has had an appetite in the past for us to do that. And I'd be happy to write that up and email it to you tonight if you need it.
Okay.
If the group is good with that project.
100%.
I vote aye.
another question for you, Matt, as far as spring fencing materials, where are we sitting? Are we starting to run short, or?
No, I think we're doing all right there. I don't know if Caleb has the bandwidth on his internet to speak towards that, but I think it just depends how many we wanted to tackle and so on and so forth. But yeah, Caleb, are you still on?
Looks like he dropped.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it's a project that we wanted to pitch, Scott, it's not a big deal to just ask for the money. As long as we have the appropriate clearances, it's not a big lift if we
Yeah.
have the materials or not.
So will you just speak to the Go Shoot Dolly Varden spring protection? Sean wasn't at the field trip, and I know we mentioned it kind of in passing, but.
Sure. Yeah. So, do you remember when that EA was signed, Scott? Was that 2015 maybe?
I would have said 16, but yeah, somewhere in there.
So, Caleb really spearheaded this spring protection environmental assessment in the Go Shoot Mountains, which is really a difficult process because a lot of it was in wilderness study area. And so initially there were several springs that were identified for fencing for those protection against wild horses. We've fenced a few, but we recently finished another determination of MDEP adequacy to do more fencing. As a matter of fact, we have one on the books in Morgan Basin to be fenced sometime in between November 15th and January 31st. And I think, Scott, you can definitely do a better job of speaking towards how many deer would potentially benefit from these projects, and so on. But it's something we've been working on. We'll probably try to complete another fence this spring, and then into fall again. We'll just keep this rotation going until we have a lot of springs fenced in that country. Fortunate that that's our solution, but without movement on the wild horse front, that is where we're at.
And that DNA covered, was it 7 or 8 springs, then Dolly Varden's also?
Yeah, so that did get into some of those springs. Sean, specifically over on the east side and some on the west side, the Dolly Vardens.
Mhm.
And
Great.
yeah. And like Scott said, I think some of that country, we will definitely be looking at to do more pinyon juniper treatment into the future. There's always something in the works. We presently have something in the works for that north end of the Cherry Creeks for pinyon juniper, and then some of those other kind of islands, the Delsar Buttes and the Medicines, the north end of the Medicines or the east side of the Medicines, getting into a bunch of that country. But the NEPA process is a difficult one. And so they have one big project in the queue right now. As soon as they get done, they can start working on these others. So into the future, we could potentially be bringing up some of those that you mentioned, which I think are important. And so protecting these springs kind of goes hand in hand with some of those pinyon juniper treatments. That's why I mentioned it.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, I mean, we could do it this year, we can look at it in the future, but was there 15 cleared springs at least?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you though, I think we're also, I put in for a good amount of funding over there and into the Matt Maples industrial pond grant. He's also got quite a bit of funding in there. So it sounds like in between some a fence proposal, shrub planting, and then are you thinking about that East Humboldt deer collaring? No, is that next year, Scott?
I would say next year, but I just wanted everybody to know that that was an important topic moving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Tom. I mean, if we didn't come up with 3 projects that we thought were really valuable, I mean, is 3 like the magic number? Do we have to get there, Scott, Tom?
I think a max of 3 is what it says. So I think we can, if we wanted to, we agreed that 2 is fine, and knowing that we already have a lot of project work going on and a lot of funding secured for that project work. I don't know if Tom's still on, but I'm comfortable with only sending in 2 if that's what we land on.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that, just as long as the group continues to think about more projects, right?
Yeah.
Maybe more specific projects for coyotes in the future. Or if you see, you guys are out in the field and you see a fence, you're just like, man, this thing really could use some work. You know, like just keeping those things, and, you know, maybe other people that you know, just projects in 10 that you see impacting the area, 10 mule deer herd. We're not done with this process tonight. So I think it's important to be thinking about these things into the future. Bert, Walt, you're quiet now.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I understand where we're headed, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, ditto. We're good.
So let me share my screen really quick. So this is the habitat project proposal form. It's pretty cut and dry. So this is the one we'll be filling out for the shrub planting. And then
Just for my purposes, Scott, approximately how many acres do you think you've flown that and maybe looked at it more recently than I have? Are we thinking 1,000, 2,000 acres or more? Because just to give me some sideboards, some parameters to write that.
I would say probably 2, just knowing the extent of corral running all the way up through there on those smaller benches.
Okay.
And then, the extent of that bench above the road there.
Yeah, we can always change things a bit. So, okay.
Yeah. So this is the non-habitat project form. Again, it's going into our limiting factor score, needs assessment strategy. And then everything else is pretty cut and dry. So I just wanted you guys to see that. That's what Matt and I will be filling out and submitting tomorrow as part of this. I guess before we get too far ahead of ourselves, do we want to take a vote on the projects to be submitted as a team?
I think that's pretty easy.
Yep.
I think we vote yes on whatever 2 or 3 you guys decide to put in. It's a yes from me.
So rethinking this, knowing that they asked for 3 project proposals. What do you guys think? We'll do the fence modification, broad, asking for a set dollar amount, and we'll go out and find the projects once we secure the funding. Quarter-fire shrub planting, and then we could submit another open-ended Buck Mountain PJ habitat enhancement project proposal, and just be really broad with or just lack specifics in where our project area is going to be. Just talk about South Rubies, and just know that if there's any available funding, we would be more than willing to take it down there. And then if there's other projects that rise to the top and that one falls off, you know, such as life, but at least we're giving the Oversight Committee 3 pretty strong projects that, you know, if there's any funding available, we'd be happy to take it.
So moved.
I'm good with that.
Okay, I guess I am a voting member, so. So Bert, you're the one that's more up to date on open meeting laws and all that stuff. Was that good enough for a motion?
Yes,
Okay, we have a second?
that's sort of what I did, was seconded your
Oh.
motion. Sorry.
Okay,
I said so moved, but I should have said seconded.
okay. And everybody in favor?
Aye.
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 Walt, you said aye?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Tom, are you on there?
Says he is.
Yeah,
Don't think
so it says we're supposed to take public comment. And persons invited to submit written comments to ndow@ndow.org or make a comment during the meeting by raising their virtual hand. Since we don't have anybody to raise their hand. We better take, let's go till 6:45 and we'll wait for public comment. And if anybody submits it, we'll address it. And if not, we'll move on to the 6th agenda item. So everybody take 2.5 minutes.
Scott, if you send me that habitat form, I'll fill it out right now.
Okay.
How specific do I need to be in the comment or the kind of description at the bottom?
As specific as you can be, but I don't think, small details are gonna make or break it. 6:45. I'm assuming we don't have any public comments, or Tom would be jumping back on because they should be routed through him. So 6th agenda item is just future subcommittee meetings. I guess backtracking a little bit, the oversight committee's meeting in the coming days. That's why tomorrow's the deadline for the project proposals. With their posting and everything else, tomorrow was the drop dead date for that. So future subcommittee meetings, I'm not sure exactly what the timeline will look like. I don't know if they're gonna be able to fully vet all the proposed projects at the coming meeting, or if they're gonna need a second hearing. And so I'm not sure exactly what the next meeting will look like for us. I'm guessing it'll be to address the oversight committee's decisions, and then we can, plan our projects moving forward. So I would say date and time for next meeting, TBD. We'll touch bases and hope that it's not in the middle of deer season the next time, because the difficulty of that. And so with that, I think we can move to adjourn.
So moved.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much for getting on here and making it happen, because I know it's a difficult time for everybody and nobody wanted to be here. So thanks again for doing that.
Fine, Scott. It was fine.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you guys for putting in the time.
yeah. We'll be in contact sometime soon.
Okay.
All right.